Well, Reverend Dr. Pamela Hancock, thank you so much for spending this time with me in honor of Women's History Month, such a special time of the year.
Yes.
I've just got a few questions to kind of enhance our conversation, and I'll just really kick it off to say, why do you feel like it's relevant, especially during this year of 2026,
Ugh.
to honor Women's History Month? And well, I'll just start there. Why do you think
Sure.
it's important? Yeah.
Oh, I mean, obviously, there's a lot going on in the world. But I think honoring Women's History Month in 2026 is still deeply necessary because the truth is, the story of women has never been singular and it has never been fully told.
Mm.
When we say women's history, we have to ask which women, whose voices were preserved and whose were erased. So for me, honoring this month isn't about a generalized celebration of women as one unified category, because that's really impossible. It's about slowing down enough to listen for the differences, to recognize that a white woman in, let's say, California, and a black woman in the South, and an indigenous woman protecting her land, or a trans woman navigating safety, and a woman in a war-torn region are not living the same story, and they never have been.
Mm. That is so incredibly astute in terms of just recognizing that we as women come from different walks of life and have had been have these different, varying, diverse experiences that influence our notion of what it means to be a woman on this planet. And, along those lines, you've already kind of eloquently alluded to this, but I'm curious, how do we honor this Women's History Month this year with that special attention to intersectionality, difference of locations,
Oof.
concerns nationally and globally as we're so connected in this world, especially through technology?
Right.
How do we grapple with that?
Yeah, I mean, more so now than ever, right? So, I mean, intersectionality can't be an add-on to that. It's really the starting point. And I think in 2026, especially, we are being asked to move beyond symbolic acknowledgement into something more embodied and
Mm,
accountable. So, like, that means amplifying voices that have historically been marginalized, which we do here at Star King, being willing to feel discomfort when we confront inequity, right?
mm,
And recognizing that honoring women also means examining the systems that still constrain us. Yeah. I mean, because that's kind of what's been going on for a long time. Um, from my own lens, as someone rooted in depth and Jungian psychology and spiritual care, I would say this is also about reclaiming what has been exiled,
mm,
not just socially, but psychologically and spiritually, because those are impacted by all of that. The voices, ways of knowing, and forms of power that were dismissed or even diminished, excuse me, are all pieces of that because the social aspect is like the bigger macrocosm, but like how it's affecting each one of us individually is that spiritual and psychological piece. So honoring Women's History Month becomes a kind of ritual act if we allow it to be. It can be a remembering, it can be a reweaving, a commitment to telling more truthful, more complex stories. That's huge. I try to encourage that in my classes. And maybe most importantly, it's about how we carry that forward, right? Not just for a month, but
yes.
in the structures we build, the spaces we hold, and the ways we show up for one another.
Mm, mm. What you're saying just really is resonating with me. And you're right. At Star King, we really put this type of thought process, this critical thought process, at the heart of the matter, in the center of the learning process. If I may just
Mhm.
go a little bit on a tangent, how have you experienced our students in terms of their recognition of women's contributions for this particular month, but also just maybe in general to theological education?
Well, I think that the students really recognize that that isn't necessarily part of a regular education. I think that's why they come to this school. And that's one of the pieces that I try to highlight is I encourage a lot of different source texts within our classes. So, being able to say this is by a BIPOC woman, this is from a woman struggling in another country, like having those as examples for all of the classes is kind of necessary because that has been left out of a lot of religious and educational institutions for a long time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that kind of leads me to the next question. I'm
Hmm.
curious about what are your emerging concerns for women in this spiritual and political moment?
Hmm.
And how do you specifically address them in your work here at
Mm.
Star King?
Ooh, I love that. I mean, it it would be hard to not. I'm not going to go off on a tangent about our current political landscape, which I very well could. But I think one of my deepest concerns for women in this current spiritual and political moment is that we are still living inside systems that, in many ways, ask women to disconnect from their own authority,
Mm,
especially their embodied, intuitive, and relational ways of knowing. For so long, those things weren't valued, and it's still part of the landscape. That shows up everywhere. It shows up in spiritual spaces, in political structures, even in helping professions. So, in my work here at Star King and beyond, I'm really interested in how we can reclaim that authority not just intellectually, but psychologically and spiritually, because everything kind of comes back to that in the work that I do here. So this is where depth and Jungian psychology become incredibly important in the work that I'm doing here. So, as you know, Stephanie, I have my PhD in depth psychology with a focus in Jungian and archetypal studies, because gosh, that's a long title. And it's through that lens which I teach our students how to be chaplains. So,
mm,
right now, I'm actually teaching the depth psychology for chaplains course.
mm,
In it, I'm diving into some really complex topics. For instance, Jung spoke about what he called the religious function of the psyche, this innate human capacity to make meaning through symbol and story and encounter with something larger than ourselves. And that's really essential in chaplaincy because we are constantly sitting with people on the edge of meaning, like grief and trauma and illness and loss, and helping them orient to what is happening in their lives, like within that context. But that kind of work requires a very particular kind of presence.
mm,
Um, and this is something that I'm teaching very explicitly in the deep listening course, which was being offered again in fall 27. So, deep listening or active listening is one of the most essential tools we have as spiritual care providers. It's not just about hearing words, it's about cultivating the capacity to be with another person in a way that is attuned and non anxious and genuinely receptive. So, being a presence.
mm,
And I would say this form of listening is deeply aligned with ways of knowing that women have long carried, right? Relational, intuitive, and embodied ways of being that have often been undervalued or dismissed in more hierarchical or outcome-driven systems. And that's not chaplaincy. So part of what we're doing in that course is not just teaching a skill, we're reclaiming a way of being in relationship that is profoundly needed in the world right now. Like, think about if everybody had that skill set, like deeply listen. I mean, the whole political landscape would be a different environment. And that same ethos carries into the psychedelic chaplaincy program here at Star King. Very excited about the fact that MDiv is officially launching this coming fall. I'm so excited. Um, and that is a complex and rigorous program bringing together theology and ethics and pastoral care and interreligious curiosity and knowledge of psychedelic assisted care. And within that, we are very intentionally creating spaces for voices that have historically been marginalized in both religious and psychedelic contexts, especially women, BIPOC practitioners, and those outside of dominant frameworks. Because unfortunately, the psychedelic field as we know it in the West, like many others, have been largely male dominated. Yet the work itself, holding space for altered states, for vulnerability, for transformation, is deeply relational and embodied and requires a kind of attunement that women and other marginalized practitioners have been carrying unrecognized. So, part of my work is not just training chaplains and psychedelic chaplains, but it's my hope, and that's why I'm going to conferences, to reshape the culture of the field, right?
Mhm.
So, along with my institutional work, I'm also doing very grounded community-based work through the Sacred Path Sanctuary, which is my California religious nonprofit that we just started here in my home in the Southern California mountains, which is the land of the Yuhaviatam people. So here I'm working explicitly with the divine feminine, not as an abstract concept, but as something that can be encountered and embodied and lived. I'm training priestesses to hold space in their communities, to facilitate ritual, to tend to grief, and to guide people through transformation, which have all been the honor of women since ancient times. Um, because what I see is that people are hungry for spaces where their experience is not pathologized, where their intuition is not dismissed, and where meaning making is honored as sacred. And that's also reflected in my writing. So I'm actually reading a book right now with all that spare time, particularly in developing this concept that I'm calling the Talus woman. So the idea of a woman who gathers the sacred objects of her own individuation journey, her archetypal journey, who learns to trust her own process of becoming as that unfolds. I'm about halfway through writing that book, and I'm excited about how it can evolve the landscape of women's spirituality and how that is intersecting with Jungian psychology. So for me, all of these concerns are real, but so is my response to them. It's about creating structures and programs and spaces where women and really all peoples can reconnect with their own authority and their own symbolic life and their capacity to make meaning in a world that often tries to take that away. And I'm saying all of this, as I'm saying all of this, I'm so aware that this isn't theoretical. It's something we're all actively navigating in real time, especially here at Star King. So I'd be curious to hear from you, Stephanie, because I'm a chaplain, so I have to ask questions. How are you holding this moment? What feels most important to you as the leader of this school in shaping spaces where kinds of conversations like this can take root? How is
Mhm.
this all going for you?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for the question and thank you for the brilliance and beauty and light that you're bringing into our world and certainly here with directly within the Star King community. I really find that in this role as president, it's a true honor and a really humbling moment It is a space that has, even through the interview process, has been really soul affirming in terms of who I am, the identities that I bring to the table, and certainly, first and foremost, being an African American woman. I think that Star King creates a space not only for administrators like myself, but for faculty and students to really bring their full and whole selves. And I think in that invitation and in that welcome, we have to make sure that we are putting together a space in place that not only feels welcoming, but also provides respect and dignity and honors the lived experience that we bring and perhaps even honors and recognizes the transformation that we all undergo on a daily basis, depending on what's going on in our environments and our experiences. And so, with that said, I feel like it's, I'll just harken back, a great honor to lead this institution, to be one of the faces and voices, to say that you belong, that you are welcome, that you are on a journey in which we feel a deep honor, respect, and commitment to ensure that you find or that your journey rather is one that is can be soul affirming, that can be um, all encompassing in terms of you being able to bring that full and whole self. Again, I'll just kind of repeat that because I think many institutions aspire to create space where one can bring their full and whole self, certainly in seminary.
Right.
But we hear too many stories of faculty and students, and maybe even staff for that matter, feeling like they can only bring part of themselves into an institutional structure. And I think at Star King, we really think about institution in a different way. We think about centering many voices across different constituencies. So whether that be student voice, of course, faculty voice, alumni voice, etc. But all of this is to say that Star King is a very special space, in one in which that we can support brilliance like your own in making such a huge, truly, a lot of folks say they want to make a change in the world or make a difference, but we really are making a true difference in the world. And that certainly starts with the learning process in the classroom, but even beyond that, really connecting what we learn in the classroom directly to the varying communities that our faculty, staff, students, alum represent.
Mhm.
So thank you for the question. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I love what you said about soul affirming. I think if we
Mhm.
showed up in all of our courses, all of the shared spaces we are with our students, and that was just our primary objective, I
Yeah.
mean, oh, that would be magnificent. So I actually wrote it down because I really appreciate that phrase. So thank you for sharing that with me too.
Absolutely. Well, I have one I shouldn't say one final question because I feel like we could talk a long time and just break out our tea and coffee for a little bit. But that is there a woman or women that come to mind that inspire your work and encourage you to continue to move forward in the brilliant ways that you are.
Oh, wow. So my absolute all-time favorite anything is the artist Remedios Faro. She's a surrealist painter from Spain who ended up being like a revolutionary and getting involved in wars. And let me see if there's a easy access point. I have a massive book, but I don't know if it's something I can easily grab or actually where it is at the moment because I was writing um, a book about her and some other women as being kind of at the forefront of our modern idea of the witch. Because she was in spiritualist movements, she ended up moving to Mexico and being friends with Frida Kahlo. And she just, if you've never seen her work, I highly recommend looking her up because, I mean, I love Frida, as
Mhm.
most people who love surrealist paintings do, but Remedios Varo is like, I don't know. I think she's better. Which is hard to say as somebody who loves both of them so much, but because of the fact that she never backed down ever. And she was in some really scary situations. She got incarcerated because she was fighting against oppression in different spaces in Europe at the time. And she just did whatever the heck she wanted to do, which I greatly appreciate. She painted what she wanted to paint, and her pieces are massive. I went to a Surrealist Women exhibit in Los Angeles, gosh, 20 years ago, and I just remember, I mean, her paintings are like the size of a wall, like just massive, and there's just all these little details, and her art really personifies my spiritual process through my whole life. Like there is always a piece that I can go, oh, this is what I'm feeling right now. And art is so important to me. Before I was an academic and a mom, I was an artist. So the being able to capture the psychological and spiritual landscape of someone and then place it in such a way that other people can feel it through the canvas is so huge to me. In fact, my poor husband, there's a very large tarot, a history of tarot exhibit happening in New York in the summertime, and I was like, there's going to be a Remedios Faro piece in it that I've never seen before, and I was like, I'm going to this exhibit, and he's like, okay, sweetheart, because he knew I wouldn't back down. So look her up. Phenomenal. Just being able to have someone illustrate so many internal feelings psychologically and spiritually is so inspirational, and it's nice that I can I can feel like I'm not alone, you know.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the important thing about anyone, like a writer, a poet, any woman showing up in those spaces is allowing others to have that mirror put up to them. So that's what I'm gonna
Oh,
say.
that's beautiful. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing.
I'll have to email you one of her painting or a couple of her paintings.
Please do.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, Reverend Dr. Pamela, thank you again for your time and having this conversation. You've really um, made me feel so inspired and just so blessed that you are on faculty here at Star King and for all the tremendous work that you are doing out in the field to make a difference is just incredible.
Thank you, Dr. Stephanie. And it's so wonderful having such a powerful and amazing woman at our helm. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.